Hello and welcome everybody to today's sessions of the 100 Brilliant Women in AI Ethics Summit. My name is Sinit Zeru and I'm deeply honored to be a member of the advisory panel and to have the opportunity to speak with you today. When Mia reached out to me to participate in the summit, I had two thoughts. Wow, what an honor and an amazing opportunity to learn from so many women. My second thought was, I'm not very techie and I'm definitely not an AI ethics expert. I work with technological people, but I don't know if I really belong in a summit like this. Fortunately, Mia reassured me there was enough tech and AI expertise in the room. In the spirit of this summit, what she wanted was to expand the types of voices in the debate, to enable more diverse thinking on the tough issues that AI creates, and to make space for the people who are impacted by these issues and yet woefully underrepresented. For this year's event, I know there has been special effort to include voices from underrepresented regions like Sub-Saharan Africa, where I'm from and where I live and work. It's hard to say both accurate and meaningful things about Africa because of its incredible diversity and because of the fear of feeding the misperception that it's a more homogeneous place than it really is. It's a continent of 54 nation states. To narrow that just slightly, I will focus on Sub-Saharan Africa because that's the region I'm more familiar with. But even then, that's still 46 countries, and I've only been to 14 of those. That's less than a third. Within countries, there's enormous diversity. Ethiopia, where I am right now, is the second most populous African country with 110 million people, and it has over 80 languages. Eritrea next door, which is where I'm originally from, is about 10% the landmass of Ethiopia and over 80 times smaller than the USA. And still, it has 9 official languages, and I only speak one of them. So I've been feeling very daunted about this talk because I want to make a fair and dignified representation, and I want to do it in 10 minutes. Luckily, I had an epiphany. The inclusivity movement that initiatives like 100 Brilliant Women feeds means I can worry less about the burden of being the token one, who has to speak on behalf of all Africans, or all African women, or all of anything. I can be reassured that I'm not alone, and I don't have to know all the answers, and that's a really good place to start. All I can do is share my story and my reflections on the ways that AI ethics matters, in particular to Africa, and why Africans matter to the AI ethics debate. I do that not with the intention of drawing any firm conclusions, quite the contrary. This is an invitation to hear your stories and your reflections on Africa in this context. So I will begin with my story. As I said, I'm originally from Eritrea. I was born in Ethiopia, but moved to the UK with my family as a child refugee, escaping the military Derg regime at the time, like many other desperate families. After studying and working in the UK, I moved back to Africa, not just to escape the British weather, but because I believe passionately that Africans have both the opportunity and responsibility to shape the continent's future. I also believe that the best way to do this is to contribute our talents, share our stories, and to collaborate with everyone committed to the cause, African and non-African alike. This is not an exclusive venture, and to be included as equals in the tech revolution, we must be inclusive in our efforts. I've been living and working across Africa for over a decade, and for most of that time, I've been working with African governments through the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. The Tony Blair Institute is a nonprofit whose mission is to support political leaders and governments to build open, inclusive, and prosperous societies, and to do that in an increasingly complex, interdependent, and technologically driven world. I work in our Africa Governance Advisory Team. I'm currently based in Addis Ababa, my city of birth. My primary role here is to support the Ethiopian Ministry of Innovation and Technology to implement the National Digital Strategy, which was approved by the Council of Ministers in June 2020. I was privileged to lead the team from the Institute that helped draft that strategy. And we did that in partnership with the ministry itself and with Oxford University's Pathways for Prosperity Commission, a specialist commission that, like my organization, was grappling with the big questions around the fourth industrial revolution and how developing countries can navigate and leverage both the risks and opportunities. My team also recently partnered with the AI for Good Foundation to draft Ethiopia's national AI policy. This will guide the work of the Ethiopian government's AI Institute, which was inaugurated in September this year. If you're surprised that Ethiopia has a government AI institute, it's fine. Many of my Ethiopian friends are too. But it is a brilliant sign of the times. In addition to my work in Ethiopia, I am part of a global team at the Institute that is responding to exponentially growing demand from governments on how to utilize technologies like AI for inclusive development. My experience professionally and personally informs my reflections on why Africa needs greater representation within the AI ethics debate, and why greater inclusions of Africans is critical to that debate and to the continent's future. I will briefly share and reflect upon the three big themes that I think really matter in particular. My first big theme is the impact of technologies like AI on traditional economic development pathways. That traditional economic development pathway has typically involved upscaling from low-grade, labor-intensive production to more complex manufacturing, and the shift to services and policies that then feed innovations to enable developing countries to go further up the ladder. This pathway depends heavily on global manufacturing, utilizing the cheapest labor they can find to drive development and to help countries go up the first couple of steps on that ladder. While this traditional pathway has involved exploitation and huge inequalities, it has also lifted millions out of poverty. The government and BPO sectors in particular have economically empowered women in developing countries. And you can see that in India, in China, in Latin America. The thing is, new technologies like robotics, machine learning, big data, 3D printing are narrowing that traditional pathway. Many African countries have really just begun competing with Southeast Asia with respect to cheap labor. But now the cheapest labor are robots, sophisticated machinery, or even kind of online customer service bots. It makes sense to have your production as close as possible to the most lucrative markets, or where energy is available, reliable, and cheap. So few African countries can really compete in this new global environment. I want to be very careful not to feed the dark continent narrative, but I don't want to deny or gloss over the fact that sub-Saharan Africa is disproportionately impacted by extreme poverty. And while this threat to economic development as we know it is real, the truth is technologies like AI also create significantly new and unique opportunities for the continent. The African Union ratified its continental digital strategy in February 2020, and it states, Africa has fewer legacy challenges to deal with and is therefore adopting digitized solutions faster out of necessity. For Africa, the current moment offers a leapfrogging opportunity. I see it on the ground. Tech hubs are growing across the continent. Africans find themselves with unprecedented access to the world via their phones. I don't think you can walk through the city center in Nairobi, Lagos, Joburg, or Kigali without bumping into an African who believes they are a Black Bill Gates in the making, to quote another brilliant woman. How can we ensure that these new economic opportunities are fair? How can we ensure that the leapfrogging experience won't increase the economic divide? African women in particular are severely underrepresented in these tech hubs and disproportionately represented in the sectors that traditional economic development depends on. What can we do about that? Governments everywhere are struggling to regulate and fairly tax global tech firms. Yet Africa is least able to absorb the loss in tax revenue. And while expertise is growing, governments have limited capacity and resources to regulate such firms and the data that is being collected about their citizens. My second big theme is identity. According to that same African Union strategy, approximately 542 million people in Africa do not have a foundational identification and therefore are invisible. Again, women are disproportionately impacted and excluded. A lack of legal identity prevents you from claiming your rights as a citizen, your rights to land, for institutions to recognize your family, and your ability to travel. In particular, means of identity is critical for refugees and internally displaced people. According to the Internal Displacement Monitor, Africa hosts over 1/3 of the globally forced displacement population. Immigration and the plight of refugees is naturally close to my heart. Digital ID is a key pillar of the AU continental strategy for good reason. Organizations like ID for Africa and the UN's Economic Commission for Africa see the potential for digital ID to empower citizens, to deliver better public services, to facilitate economic productivity, and enhance the transparency of institutions. If policies are harmonized across the continent, it can unleash inter-Africa trade and facilitate peace and security. But all of that is based on the premise that digital ID is done right. What does that mean, and what can we do to empower both governments and citizens to design respectful, safe, and effective systems? My final theme is really two in one. It's representative knowledge and its associated power. There are many institutional barriers to Africans doing AI research and having African knowledge in this field treated as valid and worthy of global attention. This is also most prominent for African women. Amongst these barriers are limited or poor quality educational opportunities in specialist fields like AI, a lack of funding for research, and also not being able to get a visa to study or attend global conferences. In 2019, over 100 Africans were denied a Canadian visa so they could attend the Neural Information Processing Systems Conference. This happened in spite of planned workshops around machine learning for the developing world and Black in AI, which in fact featured brilliant women from the summit's previous lists. Nevertheless, I'm optimistic because I see the justifiable growing investment that both governments, private sector companies, and individual Africans are making. The University of Lagos launched Nigeria's first AI hub in June 2018. Google opened its first AI research center in Accra, Ghana in 2019. IBM's Think Lab is in Nairobi and Joburg already, just to mention a few. This is a beginning, but until Africans are curating and owning their data solution, until they are central in the process of defining the challenges and opportunities that they care about, until we can invest in our own knowledge and commit to address the inequalities within our own communities, we will not realize the potential of artificial intelligence. And we risk remaining on the periphery as mere recipients of a worldview that has historically excluded us. That is not ethical. I repeat my belief in collaboration, but for that to be done as peers, African knowledge, research, and voices in AI need nurture and recognition. The experience of Timnit Gebru no doubt has lessons for all those committed to the recognition and nurture of African women in this field. Again, that is why I'm so appreciative of this summit and everything it stands for. Thank you for your attention, and I really look forward to continuing to learn from all of you.